So the following video might have some content that might trigger people when it comes to depression and anxiety. So if that's you, please don't proceed watching this video. This video, I wanted to share a little bit about my journey with depression and how I cured my own depression, and honestly the difference between depression and being depressed, because I find in my own experience that there is. Throughout my own history, from being basically a kid in high school, putting way too much pressure on myself, having way too much pressure on myself, feeling like I was the dunce of the family. I don't know why, but somehow I managed to develop a sense of deep depression within myself. Something that became like a lingering thought through my whole life. I've been someone who has been honestly very fun, very excitable, but I've also simultaneously through most of my life battled intense depressive thoughts and intense thoughts of self-harm and things like that. Honestly, this is why I'm a huge fan of emotional healing and emotional surrender, because it was one of the things that truly, truly helped me. So I'm going to be sharing in this video my journey with depression, how I healed it within myself, and if there's anything that you get out of this, fantastic, and if not, then that's also fantastic. So basically, it was when I was Mr. Harvey Hook, the dating coach, and I was working with women, that was when I started really understanding the concepts behind emotional healing and emotional surrender. And it's where, I don't know if you see me post on Instagram, you'll see me post a lot. Often the best way to heal is to feel. And it was when I remember I had just come off from, touring the world and coaching men and all this fun stuff that I like to be like, ooh, isn't that exciting? But I was an Uber driver at the time. I was working, doing Mr. Harvey Hook, the dating coach, but I was also Uber driving to sustain myself. And it was during this time that basically between passengers, I started entering a deep state of surrender, realizing that I actually had deep suppressed depression within me and I wanted to fucking just resolve it. I entered a deep state of surrender. And I remember feeling like it was like I was looking over a cliff, and beyond the cliff was just an abyss of darkness, like an abyss of just empty black void of just depression. And that if I was to feel my way out of this, there was a lot to feel. So during this time, I started to have a lot of weird little physiological changes. I noticed my face started to do weird things in my scalp as well, which my partner always loves. She always loves pointing it out when my head does these weird things. It's like a healing thing. It's like my inner space has changed, so my outer space changes too. It's really interesting. But it was around the time that I was healing. Basically, when I was an Uber driver, then I would just go home and I would lie in bed and just be bedridden, because I was finally admitting to myself how depressed I truly was. So I was surrendering. If you don't know what surrender is, as always, it's just the act of just letting yourself feel things. Eventually, the emotions pass and subside. If you do want an advanced, like an introduction to it properly, I do have a course. Link will be in the description. And if there is no link in the description, message me. But long story short, that's when I started realizing there was a lot of things in my life that, as I was slowly healing, only retrospect, because at the time it just felt like there was a lot of stuff for me to get through. Retrospect, I now see that I actually started to change my life, because I know now that as you surrender to things, what ends up happening is, although you might not have cured the whole depression pie, every time you surrender, you're actually healing a depression slice of that depression pie. So what ended up happening is, automatically during this time, I actually started to reorientate my life. So there was a lot of stuff you hear me talk about on this channel, and in the courses and stuff that I produce. Basically, you'll hear me talk about how I created a prison for myself, like with my business. I wanted to be this free mobile person, but I created a business that required more time than I had to give. So I stopped doing it. And all I was doing was feeling and healing and feeling and healing. Now, I don't, from, again, retrospect, no need to quit your job or stop doing what works to do this. Just do it alongside it. But I was so passionate about this, so intensely passionate about surrender and processing, and I didn't quite know what it was for, like what I was doing. I was just feeling that eventually I ran out of money. Like at one point, I'd made more money coaching than I had being an Uber driver, so I quit being an Uber driver. But then I stopped making money through coaching because the things that I was doing, I stopped doing, if that makes sense. So what ended up happening was I ran out of money, and I find in universal cosmic alignment, the same time that my housemate wanted to, change things up, I ran out of money and it was time to go home. Now, if I wasn't for my family, I probably would have been either homeless or struggling or living on friends' couches or things like that. So I always thank my family for this. But it was then 2019 that I then spent my time refining the healing process. Not necessarily knowing what I'm doing, just knowing that I have to feel it. Every time I'm feeling it, feels better than before. And basically picking myself up off my feet. I had failed as a coach and struggled for most of my life with trying to make money. Still do in some way, processing that, honestly. But there was a lot of experiments that I'd done. I tried then doing workshops with some of the experiments that I'd done, getting some results. But it was all brought me back down to the same thing. Obviously, the best way to feel is to heal. The heal is to feel. And I remember there was one day where it was like the final day. This is what I often call final surrender, where you really do decide, like, all right, I'm going to go deep into this. It's the only time. I've got to do it now. There's a calling within you to feel the final dregs. And so that day, I remember I was lying in bed just like I normally would in 2019, before the virus hit. Lying in bed before I normally would, and I just felt and surrendered and went deeper and deeper and deeper, and layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of just sadness and angst and self-hate and self-harm, and every thought and feeling that came up, I just let exist, as painful as it was. But when I eventually came out of this state that lasted the whole day, it was like the core of me that was depressed was no longer depressed. The core. And I bring this up as a saying. Like, I want you to recognize that it's a core thing. That as that core of me was essentially healed, my life started reorientating itself. Because this part of me that had been depressed for my whole life was no longer depressed, it just resolved itself. I then allowed myself to get the job. Job had been had been throwing itself at me the entire time, but I allowed myself to work. From there, I then moved in with my partner because I was able to sustain myself. And from there, I started healing more and more in my life. This is where then I've gone forth, and now I share this. 2020, during lockdown, first lockdown in Melbourne, Australia, I started to refine this process a lot more, heal more and more and more of the bullshit angst within me. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes, and I want to get this across, sometimes I do still get depressed. But there's a difference between depression and depressed. Sometimes life depresses you. Sometimes we get stuck in something. Sometimes we just feel down. And there is absolutely no way or no reason or rhyme to describe it. But depression, the sunken emptiness abyss of just the impossibility of existence, at a core level no longer exists. This is why I often say that we don't need to worry about confidence. Confidence comes as a result of healing. Because that was the very first thing that I learned. I started being me. I started being the me that I'd always wanted to be for my whole fucking life. The me that I had been the whole time. If you hear me talk about there's a lot of stuff that we already know, we just got to tap into it. It's like, this is the reason why. It was from this moment I realized, holy shit, I'm letting myself be me now. The me that I had forgotten because I just accumulated so much fucking layers of emotional layers from the people around me, from society, and sometimes from just not being strong enough. So this is my story of, I guess, healing depression. From there, I recognized that there was a lot of other stuff within me I had to heal. Self-harm thoughts, thoughts that people hate me. All the stuff I fucking share on this channel is from either my own journey or helping other people. I remember during my first phase of learning about surrender and not necessarily realizing what it was, I remember I had a client and she was depressed, and I recognized within her that she was depressed in the same way that I had healed. Now, I was still healing at that time. This was maybe 2018, so I hadn't yet run out of money yet. So rewind the clock. And she was depressed in the way that I wasn't depressed anymore because I had healed that pie, that depression pie. And what had ended up happening was, I remember I just was like, look, you're going to meditate for 5 minutes a day on that depressed feeling. You're not going to try and change it, modify it, make it anything more or less. You're just going to surrender to that feeling. Again, not fully knowing what surrender was during this time period. I remember by the end of the week, she was bored of it. She was like, I'm bored being depressed. I want to do something else. It's like her depression had resolved. For me, I learned depression for me was actually deep introspection. I'd hurt myself for many years with such deep, painful thoughts and stuff that I did not know how to handle. That was actually, the act of surrender was letting that part of me think. Letting it deeply, deeply think at a core level. There's a lot of mistakes in my life that I honestly would not have made, and a lot of choices I would have not had made from this healed perspective. This is why I'm often like, the dating industry needs to be fucking revolutionized with healing. This is why the personal development industry needs to be revolutionized with healing. There's a lot of stuff that I would have not done. A lot of stuff that I would have done if I had known the things that I know now. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you did like this video, leave a like, and if you don't, it's okay. And if you want to learn more about emotional surrender and hear me yell at you for 2.5 hours, there's an amazing course called Introduction to Surrender. Link is in the description. If you do want to work with me and have me work directly with you, healing stuff in your life, remember this is self-actualization through healing. So it's not just emotions, it's not just relationships, it's life. The same things I work with you here now on these videos, I work with you through career, through health, through all of this stuff. All of it is just an emotional blockage away. And if you're going to do with it in your own time, because one of my firm beliefs, although working with me might cost money, healing yourself should not cost money. Didn't cost me anything, just time. Obviously, working with me saves you time. Let's be honest about that. But if you want, you can start now. I know some people who watch this stuff do start now. Surrender to the feelings, let them pass. It might take time. For me, it took a hell of a long time. But that's because I didn't know what I was doing. Now I do. And as a coach as well, I can see that you're trying to feel one thing and that's good, but sometimes there's something else there. Because sometimes it's not the feeling, it's the feeling about the feeling. So thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Also, check out my website. I've spent so much fucking time on it. Check it out.